recording later. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. And the PowerPoint presentation that I'm using today will also be available. So, it has a lot of useful links. So we'll be sure to save that as a PDF, and it'll be available in the description of the video of this recording that will be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully next week. So extending a study permit. Let's dive in here. So we're going to do a brief introduction and talk about the order in which you should renew your documents. We're going to do a quick refresher on the difference between study permit, co-op work permit, temporary resident or TRV, and electronic travel authorization or ETA. We'll talk about the timelines, so when you should be applying to extend your study permit. We'll talk about where you're applying from, how that impacts an application, so inside versus outside Canada. Quickly touch on biometrics. We'll go over the required academic documents needed for a study permit extension and how to request those documents. Other required documents, what to do if there's a document that you cannot include. And then we'll take a break from the PowerPoint and actually go on the IRCC website and generate a study permit extension application together, go over all of the forms that are needed, how to fill it out, how to save it, how to upload it. And then we'll come back to the PowerPoint and talk a little bit about what happens after you apply for the study permit extension with your status. What happens if you are unable to apply for a study permit extension before it expires, which I hope never happens to you, but we'll talk about it. And then finally, online versus paper applications, and then getting in touch with us. And it's not on here, but we will also be happy to answer any questions you have as well. So a lot of content, so let's just go ahead and dive in. So just by way of quick introduction, we are 3 staff members at the international office who have the required designation to be able to assist you with immigration. So they can answer and provide immigration advice. So there's myself, my colleague Ali Belbashir, and also my colleague Farha Hafsoui. So we're 3 people. So any kind of questions you have, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. Like I mentioned, this presentation is really going to be a tutorial to show you how to submit an application to extend your study permit. And then at multiple times throughout this presentation, you'll hear me say IRCC instead of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, because that is a mouthful. So I will just say IRCC, and I hope you will know what I'm referring to when I say that. So, what order should you be renewing or extending your document? So this is a question we get very often. So basically, you always want to start with your passport. So you can't be issued a status document that goes beyond the validity of your passport. So your passport always has to be valid for at least 6 months when you go to extend either your study permit or your work permit. So that's always step 1, passport. After the passport, that's when you want to extend your status document, which is your study permit or your co-op work permit if you're eligible for that. And if you're in a co-op program. So the study permit and co-op work permit is really your status document in Canada. That's what authorizes you to study and work. And then after that status document, once that's been extended, next is your travel authorization document. Now that will either be your temporary resident visa, TRV, or your electronic travel authorization, ETA, depending on your country of citizenship. So the TRV or ETA, that's really just a travel authorization. It authorizes you to enter Canada by air. It is not a status document. It doesn't give you it doesn't authorize you to study or work. It really just authorizes you to travel to Canada. So that is always the last step when you are extending or renewing your documents. So passport, study permit, then TRV or ETA. This isn't really a status document per se, but I wanted to mention it because after you've extended your study permit or co-op work, you'll also want to update your SIN record, social insurance number record. So as you know, the SIN is required for you to be able to work in Canada. So anytime you get a new status document, you always want to make sure that you're updating your SIN record to match the new validity of your status, the new expiry date of your status. So right now, because of COVID, you still want to do this online. So you can see here, we've given you the link. So once you have your new permit, make sure you go online to update that SIN record. Okay, quick refresher on what a study permit is. So obviously this is what it looks like. Yours might look a little bit prettier. Every year they kind of improve they make it look nicer. So it might not look exactly like this, but very similar. So as I mentioned, this is your status document. And this is what authorizes you to study and also work in Canada. This is what a co-op work permit looks like. So if you're admitted to a co-op program or a program that has mandatory internships or work components, you'll need this separate work permit here that allows you to work more hours than the study permit would, basically. And then this slide here is an example of a temporary resident visa, or TRV. So if you are from a country that requires these, this is what it looks like. It's basically a sticker in your passport, and that's what allows you to travel to Canada by air. And then obviously for the ETA, because it's electronic, it's just like it's electronic and it's part of your passport. So I can't show you what it looks like because it doesn't look like anything. But this is just an example of an email that confirms the ETA has been approved, but the ETA is just linked to your passport electronically. So, so that is for the ETA. Next, so in terms of timelines, so this is another very question we get from students, when should I be applying to extend my study permit? Right now, with the processing times that we're experiencing, and we're still in the pandemic, we're advising students to apply 6 months before the expiry of their current permit. Now, we don't normally advise applying earlier than that, unless there is like a special circumstance. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a student who's decided to do an international exchange now that those are allowed again. So let's say you're planning to go to, I don't know, Germany for 2 semesters, and your permits are going to expire while you're there. Now, so this student might want to renew their documents early so that they don't have to worry about it while they're abroad. So that would be a good example of a special circumstance where it might be beneficial to apply earlier. But in general, applying earlier than 6 months, an applicant risks having IRCC cancel their application because you already hold a valid status. So long story short, don't apply earlier than 6 months unless there's a very special reason. And if there is a special reason, definitely make sure it's well explained in your application why you're applying so early. And then if your document or your study permit expires sooner than 6 months, please apply as soon as possible, basically. Okay, let's talk a little bit now about where you're going to be applying from. So, because this does have an impact. So it is not possible to extend a study permit, which is your status. So it's not possible to extend your status if you're outside Canada. If you're outside Canada and your study permit is going to expire soon, what you need to do is actually submit a new study permit application from scratch from outside Canada, but as a returning student. So in that study permit application, you would include a letter of explanation that kind of explains how you're a returning student, why you're outside Canada, because of COVID, whatever. And you're going to include documentation that confirms you're a returning student. So your transcript that shows all the courses you've already taken, official enrollment verification, so that IRCC can see, okay, this is actually not a new student. This is a student who's outside and now needs to come back. So one advantage, I will say, for students who are outside is when you apply for a study permit or a work permit from outside Canada, the TRV or ETA is included in the application. So you don't actually need to then apply to renew your TRV or ETA. It's already included. So you'll apply just for the study permit. If your application is approved, they'll email you asking you for your passport. They'll put the visa in there. They'll mail it back to you, or they'll approve your ETA, and then you're going to get an email that has a letter that confirms that your study permit was approved. And then you'll travel to Canada, you'll present that letter to the border officer, and then you'll actually receive your new study permit. So that's if you're outside Canada. So outside Canada, no study permit extension, it's actually a new study permit application. But that gives context that you're a returning student. If you're inside Canada, then you'll just want to do exactly what we're going to do in this tutorial, which is just apply to extend your study permit from inside Canada. When you're applying inside Canada, unfortunately, the TRV or ETA is a separate application. So once you have extended your study permit and you've gotten a decision and approval, then you can submit another application and pay the processing fee to get a new visa or ETA. So that is the difference between for where you're applying from. Now, I want to talk a little bit about biometrics next. So right now, if you are inside Canada, you're actually exempt from giving biometrics. And that's whether you're extending your status or restoring or applying for a new work permit. If you're inside Canada at the time that you apply, you do not need to give biometrics. The application might make you pay a biometrics fee. So if you've never provided biometrics before, it might still charge you. But again, if you are inside Canada, you should be exempt. So you should be refunded that fee if ever they make you pay for it. Anyway, now this biometrics exemption, it does not apply if you're physically outside Canada. So if you're outside Canada, you will need to pay and provide your biometrics for your application to be processed. If you think you're exempt, you can communicate directly with IRCC if you think there's, if like, let's say you've gotten a biometrics letter, you've gotten a letter requesting you to give your biometrics, but you think you're exempt, definitely we gave you the link here, the IRCC web form to communicate with them if you think it's a mistake. But basically biometrics, so once you provide biometrics, which is your fingerprints and a photo, eye scan, they remain valid for 10 years once you've provided them. So if you aren't sure, if you think you've provided them in the past and you're not sure if they're still valid, there's a tool available online that allows you to check to see if they're still valid. But otherwise, if you've never provided biometrics before, you will need to give them when you're applying from outside Canada. Otherwise, inside Canada right now, you're exempt because of COVID. Okay, so that is biometrics. Sorry, just having a little drink. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about what documents are required in a study permit extension application. So in terms of academic documents, there are 3 documents that are required that you'll need to upload. The first is an official enrollment verification letter. So this is a document that confirms what you are enrolled in and any future enrollments as well. So for example, if you were to request this document today, ideally it would show your enrollment in courses this term, and it would show enrollment for winter as well. Now you can request, you can see we're giving you a link here. It's possible to request academic documents. You request them from InfoService. You request them from InfoService, and you can either order them online from your UOZone account, or you can send a request by email, and then we give you the email address a little bit later in this presentation, or their in-person services are open as well, so you can actually go request it in person also in Tabata. It is possible to also request a special remark on your document. So for example, you can ask for a comment that confirms where you are in your program. So like, you're in your second year of a 4-year program, or, and this is helpful if, depending on the time of year you're applying, let's say you're not enrolled in courses for the upcoming term because enrollment's not open, you could actually ask them to add a comment that confirms the date enrollment opens so that IRCC can see, okay, Not enrolled because not possible to be enrolled yet. It's not just that you're not studying, you know? So that is possible. Now, so that's the official enrollment verification. Another document that is required is the transcript. So this one, you know, we always recommend official in general, but you could also use your unofficial one that's in your UO zone. And that's going to tell IRCC, it's going to give them an idea of what courses you've already completed. And then finally, and this is a new required document. Before it was, you know, recommended, but it wasn't ever explicitly listed on the website. But now it is very clear. You also need to include your original offer of admission. So that is accessible once again from your UO Zone account, and it's the original one. So you don't get a new one. You don't have to have an updated one. It's just whatever one you got when you were admitted. That's the one you can use in your study permit extension. So these are the required academic documents. Now let's talk about how to request official documents. And I alluded to it a little bit, but I'll just go into more detail now. So you can, like I said, order a document using your UO Zone account, and there's a tutorial available on the InfoService website that can help you navigate that if you're having trouble. You can, like I said, send your document request by email. So you would have to fill out, it's hyperlinked here for you, the request for documents form. And then you need to send that scanned form by email to document@uottawa.ca. And then the last way is again in person in Tabare. And then I put a link here so you can see what the wait times are like, which can be helpful. So if you want a special comment, like I just mentioned, so let's say you want the date that enrollment opens, or you want a comment that confirms what year you're in, that kind of thing, then you need to submit your document request either by email or in person. You can't do the UO Zone way because there's no space for you to indicate what comment you'd like. So if you want a special comment, definitely send it by email or request the document in person so you can verbally tell them what you'd like the document to say. And there are obviously limitations as to what they can put on there. You can't put any, there's like a set number of comments that they can put. It's not just they can put anything, but there is some flexibility there. If you want an electronic copy of an official document, so normally official documents are always given paper copies, and usually they're mailed, or you can also pick them up in person, again, at InfoService in Tabare. But there is also a way to request an electronic copy. So definitely we're giving you the steps here. There's just, basically just need to put your email address instead of the physical address. And then that will allow InfoService to email you the document, a scanned copy of the document, instead of sending it by mail, by regular mail. Okay, so that is for requesting official documents. Let's talk a little about the other documents required for a study permit extension. So obviously you'll need to have your passport, and like we chatted about earlier, the passport will need to be valid for a certain amount of time. So definitely make sure that if your study permit is expiring because your passport is expiring, definitely renew your passport first. So you'll need to include all scans of all the biographical page of your passport, and then any page that has a visa or a stamp. And then it's a good idea to also scan your current study permit and include that in there. So all of these things you'll need to merge into one file and upload in this passport section. Other required documents are proof of funds. So similar to when you would have applied for your first study permit, you do need to demonstrate that you have the funds required to support yourself while you're here as a student. And IRCC doesn't really give a different amount for when it's a study permit extension. So what we advise students is to be as close as possible to the amount that you were required to demonstrate when you first applied for your study permit. So when you first applied for your study permit, if you were coming by yourself, you were required to show the equivalent of $10,000 Canadian and tuition fees for 1 year. So when you're applying to extend your study permit, that is what we recommend that you try to demonstrate. Now, depending on the time of year, again, that you're applying, it's possible that maybe you paid your tuition fees for the year, for example. If so, great. Just include your statement of account from UOzone that shows that you have no balance so that it's clear to IRCC. Great, paid tuition fees for the year. And then you can just demonstrate the living expenses at that point. One example of another document would obviously be bank statements for the past 4 months. Excuse me. You can also include pay stub, anything like that, anything that shows that you are able to provide for yourself while you are here. So that is for the proof of funds. You'll also need to include a digital photo, and then the specifications are here on the slide. And then there is an optional section as well in the study permit in your document checklist of your study permit extension application. And it's the client information section. So this section is basically an opportunity to address any gaps or explain something or something you might want to highlight in your application. So let's say you took a medical leave from your studies, or let's say you are applying early because you have an upcoming exchange, or let's say you just even want to highlight the timeline that you have left to complete your program, because I will say one of the most common complaints that we receive from students is, I didn't get the validity that I requested. And so one strategy to try to get the full validity that you're requesting, is to mention how long you have left in your program in as many places as possible in your application, basically. So if you have nothing to explain in your application, I would still recommend that you include a client information letter that at least tells them, I'm so-and-so, I'm in this program, I'm in 3rd year, and I'm requesting to extend my study permit until X date, because that's when I'm going to finish my program. That can help get you the validity that you're looking for. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick sip. Okay, let's talk a little bit now about what happens if you're missing documents. And this has definitely been something that we've seen with COVID. So if you're missing a document, let's say, for example, a passport. So your passport is expiring and you reached out to your embassy or consulate to get a new one, and there's an insane backlog, and they're saying they can't give you one until, I don't know, 6 months from now, let's say. That's an extreme example. I don't think that's going to happen, hopefully. But just as an example, let's say that happens. So that could happen. And what we would recommend in that case is that you still apply to extend your permit before it expires. That's very important because we want you to maintain your legal status in Canada. But instead of uploading your new passport in that section, what we'd recommend is that you upload a letter of explanation where you explain why you can't get the document and include a proof. So if you have a receipt that says, it's going to take 6 months, or an email, or if you have a receipt showing that you paid the processing fee for a new passport. So something that kind of corroborates what you're saying in your letter, and then mention that you'll provide the missing document as soon as it's available using the IRCC web form. So that's one way that you can request to maintain your status while you wait for your new passport. Now, that's an example for passport, but you should do this for every document that you're missing in your application. So if there's another document that you can't include because of COVID, do the same thing: letter, proof, explain. As much as possible, we would, we normally advise against submitting incomplete applications, but these are for exceptional circumstances where it's really getting close to the expiry of your permit and you're out of options. So if you end up in this situation, definitely reach out to us for a one-on-one advising appointment, and we can support you and help you review your letter and that kind of thing. But just know that there are options if you're missing documents. You can still apply. That's my key message here. Like, don't not apply because you're missing a document. Come to us if you're missing a document and before your permit expires, please. Okay, so this is where we're going to take a pause from the PowerPoint and actually go to the IRCC website. Before I get to this, before we dive into the website, I'm wondering if there are any questions about anything that we've talked about so far. If you could just let me know in the chat if that's the case. And while you think about it, I'll mention that we will have another opportunity to go over your questions at the end as well. Okay, so I see Dee Dee has a question. So Dee Dee, go ahead and type that in the chat. How long does it take to get an answer when applying for a study permit extension? So that is a good question. And unfortunately, I don't have an exact answer for you because processing times are something that fluctuate throughout the year. And I will say, especially since the onset of the pandemic, the processing times have been very inconsistent. So some students are getting decisions for a while. Some students were getting decisions in a few weeks, and then others, it's been 4 or 5 months and no answer. So it can really depend. But I would say lately it is taking closer to 3-4 months to get a decision. And again, there's no guarantee of how long it will take, but we can talk a little bit later about how you can check. With COVID, the processing times that are posted on the IRCC website are not the most accurate. But there is still a way for you to get an idea of like what they're working on so that you can get a sense of like when you might get a decision. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that are in the chat. So now I'm just going to log into the IRCC account together. I will mention that if you don't have a GC key, we do have a tutorial available, and you can see I put the link here on our PowerPoint of how to create one. So make sure to consult that if ever you have questions about how to make and you don't have an account. Oh, I see I just have one more question here. If I heard correctly, I don't need to provide bank statements if I have already paid for the year, or the statements that I have to provide are the ones to show that I can support my living expenses. Another thing, do we provide our parents' bank statements or my statements? Yes, so that's a good question. So what I was saying was if you have paid your tuition fees for the year, then the amount that you're required to show, you don't need to include the tuition fees because they've already been paid. So you'll be able to include your UO's own statement of account that shows that you have no balance owing, but you'll still need to provide statements that show that you are able to provide to pay for your living expenses. And then in terms of your statements versus your parents, if it's your parents that are providing you with money, they're supporting you during your studies, then I would say it can be their statements, but then I would also add that you need a letter, preferably notarized, that confirms that they will be providing you with funds throughout your studies. So that basically a letter saying that they're supporting you. And then we normally recommend that letter be notarized. It's more credible. Okay, let's dive in here. So you'll notice that there are 2 different ways to log in to the IRCC portal. So there's the GC key option and there's the sign-in partner. So the sign-in partner allows you to just use your online banking account basically to sign in. or GC key. Basically, you create a specific user ID and password just for IRCC. They're both perfectly valid. We have students that use both, so it's really just a personal choice at that point. We're going to go with GC key for us. And then I'm just going to pull up my info here. So you're going to log in. And hope that it works and I typed it correctly. Yes, okay, so you log in, you have to accept the terms and conditions, and then there'll be a security question. When you are creating your GC key, please make sure that you save these questions and answers somewhere because only you are going to be able to know the answers to these. So if you forget them, then it can get tricky to get into your account. So we're going to do this. Oops. Oh my goodness, I can't type today. There we go. Okay, so once you are logged in, and this is a fictitious student, this is what your account looks like. So up here, you would see any application that you already submitted. Here is where you would see your application that maybe you started, but you haven't submitted yet. And then you have some options here to start an application. So from here, what you're going to do is you're going to want to apply to come to Canada. And yes, the name is misleading because for a study permit extension, you're already here. So you're not applying to come to Canada, but this is where you need to click. Unfortunately, I wish they would change this title, but so you apply here, you're going to click here. You're only going to have a personal reference code if you've already started an application somewhere else. So if you haven't, you can just ignore it. So I don't have one. So then this is where you're going to click on what you're applying for. So we're applying to extend a study permit. So we're going to click on this one here, study. And then you're going to just answer these questions, and your answers to these questions are basically going to generate your document checklist in your account. So what would you like to do? We want to study. How long are you planning to stay? We're going to stay temporarily more than 6 months. Select the code that matches the one on your passport. So obviously this will depend on you. So for Isabella, she's Brazilian. What is your current country or territory of residence? So if you're in Canada, you select Canada. So we are in Canada. And this is why I was mentioning, if you're not in Canada and you try to extend your study permit, as soon as you click a country that is in Canada, it's not going to generate a study permit extension form. It is going to generate a application for a study permit from outside Canada form. So just keep that in mind. Do you have a family member who's a Canadian citizen or permanent resident and is 18 years or older? I'm going to put no for that. But obviously you answer yes if that's the case for you. I'm going to put in Isabella's birthday here. New Year's baby. There we go. Okay. Are you a lawful permanent of the US? No. What is your current immigration status in Canada? So here you're going to want to put student, even if you're also working, you're on a co-op, or maybe you're working part-time, you want to put student as your immigration status. What is your marital status? That also depends on you. And then what is your province of destination? So for here, I get this question a lot, because we're in the National Capital Region, we have a lot of students that live in Quebec on the Gatineau side. But in spite of that, the University of Ottawa is located in Ontario. So I would recommend that you put Ontario for this question. Okay, so you'll see here that we get two results. So we get study permit, so to extend your stay as a student, and we also get temporary resident visa. So we're not going to talk about temporary resident visa today, but just so that you are aware, this is where you would click when you want to renew visa after you have extended your study permit. So you're going to do the same process that we're doing now, but you're going to click on temporary resident visa instead of study permit when it comes time to renew a visa. So we're going to extend our study permit. So let's click here. And then continue. Continue. Okay. Okay, so are you accompanying a family member who has status in Canada? So this, if you can see, the accompanying is underlined here. So if you see it, you know, it depends if this person intends to come to Canada at the same time as you. So just answer based on your situation. So we're going to put no. Do you also want to apply for a work permit? So this is an important question if you are a co-op student or if your program includes mandatory internships or practicums or day stage, anything like that. Then if you are in one of those programs, then you'll probably want to click yes so that you can apply for that co-op or internship work permit. But in our case, Isabella is not in one of those programs. So she's going to click no. All right, when does your status in Canada expire? So we're gonna put July 31st. And then here, have you lived in a designated or country or territory for more than 6 months in the last year? So this is obviously a personal question. Now, Canada is not a designated country. Oh, sorry, I skipped a question. Yeah, so this is actually asking you if you've had a medical exam performed by an IRCC authorized panel physician or doctor within the last 12 months. So this isn't just like a regular doctor's visit. This is really like you had it done as part of an immigration application. So you answer yes or no. If you answer yes, they will ask you for the proof that you had it, just so you know. So we're going to put no, but answer based on your situation. Past year, then that's easy no. If you're not sure, I know there's been not a lot of travel, but there was kind of a lot of students who left and then returned. So you can find the list of designated countries or territories on the IRCC website. And I'll just actually show it to you really quickly. So you would search here for your country, like for example, let's say Isabella's country is Brazil. So you can see here, immigration medical exam required. Would have to answer yes to this question, and she would likely be required to undergo a medical exam as part of this application. So that's how you answer this question. So check to see if you've lived somewhere else other than Canada in the past year. Check to see if it's a designated country. If not, great, you can put no. If yes, then you have to put yes. So we're going to put no. Do you want to submit an application for a family member? So that again, if you're here with, let's say, a spouse or common law partner, or you have a child, you might want to extend their status at the same time that you extend yours. You can see here, if you click on family member, it tells you what family member is eligible. So by that I mean what family member you're able to apply for as part of your application. So it's spouse or common law partner, dependent children, and then the dependent children of the dependent children. So you can't apply for your mom or dad, for example, in this context. So for Isabella, we're going to put no. Are you giving someone access to your application? Usually this is no, unless of course you're going to work with a representative or something like that. we cannot be a representative of the university. Just as a reminder. And then this is where you would put yes if you do want IRCC to be able to release your application information to someone else. And it'll add an extra form to your document checklist. Okay, so here, in the past 10 years, have you given your fingerprints and photo biometrics for an application to come to Canada? So this is where you would answer yes or no. If you answer no, then it will add the biometrics fee to your application. However, like I mentioned earlier, if you are inside Canada, you are exempt. So it'll make you pay the fee, but you will be able to ask for a refund when they process your application because you are not required to give biometrics right now if you're inside Canada. And then if you have already given biometrics, you just answer yes, and that's that. So excuse me, I'm talking too much. Isabella has already given biometrics. And if you applied outside Canada recently, in the recent past, then you likely did provide biometrics and they should still be valid. They are valid for 10 years. So, okay. There are fees associated with this application. Will you be paying your fees or are you fee exempt? Most people, a lot of people are not exempt, but there are some who are. So as an example, a refugee claimant, a properly accredited diplomat or consular officer and their family members, temporarily destitute study permit holders. Those are examples of people who are fee exempt, but otherwise you should be paying for your application fees. Are you able to make a digital copy of your documents with a camera or scanner? Very important. You need this. You need to be able to do this to submit your application online. And because of COVID, you do have to apply online. So you do need to be able to do this. Will you be paying your fees online? And then it specifies the methods of payment they accept. So what kind of credit cards or the debit cards that are accepted. So yes. Then it gives you an opportunity to review your answers. And I would recommend that you actually review it just to make sure that there are no mistakes. So just quickly scan. Yeah, that looks good. Because it's very easy to accidentally click yes instead of no, for example. And then if all that looks good, you can continue. And then here, it gives you some guidelines about submitting an online application. So, you know, don't use someone else's account. How to save your application. And so once you start this process, so now that we've answered the questionnaire and we've built our application, that application is going to stay in your account for a maximum of 60 days. So that's the maximum. So if you do not submit your application after 60 days, it will just automatically be deleted. So keep that in mind. I know some students like to start the process early, get organized. You can get organized, but you can only actually start your application process in your account up to 60 days before you have to submit it. So just keep that in mind. And then there are some guidelines here about the documents that you're going to need to upload. So obviously they need to be in electronic format. You don't need to sign your application form by hand because you're going to be applying online. So that is very important. It's a question I get very often. So instead of physically signing the documents, what's going to happen is you're going to have a security question come up when you apply, when you submit your application, and then your answer to that security question will count as a digital signature, basically. Only one file will be allowed per item in your document checklist. So that is also important, and you'll see what I mean when we go to the next screen here. But keep that in mind. If you have more than one file that needs to be included for a certain element in your checklist, you'll need to merge them into one file. And then keep in mind the maximum file size here. So it can't be more than 4 megs. And then these are the acceptable formats. So PDF, JPEG, images, and then the documents. So then we continue. So this is your document checklist. So you can see there's basically 4 sections. So there's the application form, there are the supporting documents, the mandatory supporting documents, and then there's the optional supporting documents, and then there are the fees. And we're going to go through all of this basically. So starting with the application form, this is a question that we get very often as well. If you just try to click on this form here, it will say, please wait, and it will just stay like this forever. So what's happening is that when you click on this link, it tries to open the form in your browser. But because immigration forms are a secured PDF, it cannot be opened in a browser. It's a security measure. So you have 2 options. You basically need to download the form onto your computer and then open it from there and not in the browser. So in order to download it, you have 2 options. So either from this screen here, so once you've clicked on it and it's tried to open in a browser, you can go here to download it and then save it on your computer. Or from this screen here, you can right click and then just save it as a PDF as well. And then you'll have to go into your computer where you saved it and open it from there. So in our case, we've already saved it here. So I'm going to open it from there. Excuse me. And we'll go through the form now. Okay. Oops. Okay. So this is what the form looks like. So it's the IMM 5709. That's the form that should be generated when you're extending your study permit. And it's 6 pages, but I promise it's not as daunting as it sounds. UCI. This, even though you'll see some fields on the form have a little asterisk, those are mandatory fields. So UCI is not mandatory, but we do recommend that you put your UCI, and you can find your UCI on your current study permit. So it should be one of the numbers in the top right corner. It's basically your unique client identifier. So it just helps ensure that IRCC, that you're the same person. Like, this is for you. This is your unique client identifier. So all of your applications are under the same identifier. And then here I want service in. So you can choose either English or French. And then I'm applying for one or more of the following. So you're going to apply for the study permit for the first time or extend my study permit. You wouldn't click on this restore my status as a student unless you're in a situation where you're submitting this after your permit has already expired. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but otherwise you don't click on this, and then you don't click on this either. This is for people who have a temporary resident permit. If you're in this situation, maybe reach out to us and we can go over that in more detail, but you can not click this as well. So this is the one that you should check. Then we move to personal details. So these ones are obviously pretty straightforward. So full name, whether you've used any other name, your date of birth, where you were born, your citizenship. Here's where we start to get questions from students. So current country or territory of residence. So if you're inside Canada right now, that's what you put. And then status. So if you're here on a study permit, your study permit is valid. This is what you put here, students. And then from and to, this is a question that we get very often. So if you're ever not sure about a certain field, I recommend that you hover over it, because then it gives you a little helpful hint sometimes as well. So you can see here, it says, the start date of your immigration status in your current country of residence. So that is the issue date of your current study permit. So that is what date you would put here. And then the 2 is the end date of your immigration status. So the expiry date of your current study permit. So the study permit dates, validity dates, are what goes into this status section here of the form. And then here, during the past 5 years, have you lived in any country or territory other than your country of citizenship or your current country of residence? So again, so like if you're in a situation where maybe you moved back home for a few months, but that's your country of citizenship, that's okay. That doesn't, you don't need to disclose that. It's just if you went somewhere else. So somewhere that wasn't your country of citizenship and it wasn't your current country of residence. So just keep that in mind. And then here, marital status, obviously pretty straightforward. So then we keep going. Have you previously been married or in a common law relationship? Again, personal question. Here, there's some questions just about languages, so your native or mother tongue, and then a language of communication, and then what language you're most at ease. And then here, have you taken a test? You don't need to take a test to extend your study permit. It's just, they're just asking for the sake of asking. So you just answer yes or no. If you haven't, that's totally fine. But if you have, you can put yes. Some students need to do it for admission purposes, or maybe they've applied for something else and they had to do it. Okay, so here, passport, pretty straightforward again. So give the details of your passport here. And then you'll see that this is a very intuitive form, in the sense that as soon as you select the country or territory of issue for the passport, it'll gray out questions that are not applicable for you. So obviously you're not using a passport issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Taiwan, because the issue is Brazil, the country of issue is Brazil. So it just grays it out. You don't even need to worry about this question. Same with this. So, national identity document. This is something else that can be a little bit confusing. Not everyone has a national identity document. Not all countries do this. It's a very specific thing. So if your country does it, you probably know and you have it. It's not like a driver's license. It's not a social insurance number. It's really like, it's something that every citizen of this country has. So if you do have one, then great, you just put yes. And then if you put yes, you'll see here that the only two required fields are the number and the country or territory issue. The issue date and the expiry date are not mandatory, because honestly, some countries, there is no expiry date, or there's no issue date, or there's only one and not the other. So they're not mandatory. So you only need to give the document number and the country of issue if you have one. If you don't, just put no, and that's no problem. US PR card. So if you're a permanent resident of the US, you'd answer this. Otherwise, you can put no. Contact information. So, excuse me. This is very important. When you are putting in your current mailing address, please make sure that you input it correctly, because this address here, your current mailing address, this is where they are going to mail you your new study permit if they approve your application. So very important to triple check that this address is correct. And if you move from this address and your application is still in process, is very, very important to notify IRCC that you've moved, so that they can update your address and send your permit to the correct place. So if you do move while your application is still in progress, you'll need to use the IRCC web form to inform IRCC that you've moved and provide your new mailing address, and make sure you get a confirmation from them that they've updated it, so that it avoids your permit getting sent to the wrong place. So keep that in mind. Residential address, for most of us, that's the same. And then telephone number, alternate telephone number. I don't think anyone still uses fax, but if you do, you can put that in. Email address. So this is a optional field as well, but I do recommend that you put it in there because it will allow IRCC to communicate with you by email. You'll get an email notification that you have a message in your account if ever they need more information from you to process your application. So if you put an address here, they might send it to you by mail, and then that can add to the processing time. So just put an email address, and it doesn't have to be your U Ottawa one, just whatever email address that you check the most often. And I have also known messages to end up in spam, so make sure you're checking your spam regularly as well. Okay, coming into Canada. So this is where you're going to put in the date and place of your original entry to Canada. So think back and try to remember the very first time you entered. Maybe you have a record of it in your passport or in your calendars or emails or something. And then the original purpose that you came to Canada. If that's for your studies, great. If you originally came as like a visitor, a tourist, for example, then you would put that. But just put the actual reason for you. And then here, date and place of your most recent entry, if it's not the same as your original entry. So you can see here in Isabella's case, she originally came in 2018, but then she did, travel home and then come back right kind of before COVID really exploded. So if you have a most recent entry, you can just put it here. And then again, the place. So the airport where you landed. So I know right now there's not a lot of direct international flights to Ottawa. So maybe you landed in Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver. You can put that place instead of Ottawa. And then you can provide here the document number of the most recent visitor record, study permit, work permit, or TRP issued to you. So your current study permit, for most of you, you can just put the document number there. That is also on your current permit, top right. Okay, details of intended study in Canada. So pretty straightforward here. So University of Ottawa, the level of study. So if you're a master's student, make sure you put that. And then field of study. This obviously is not a very comprehensive list, so it's possible that your program will not be here. Pick the closest thing, or there's also the other that you can put as well. Okay. Complete address of school, so that you can just put the university's address, the designated learning institution number. That you can find if you just Google IRCC designated learning institution, you'll find the list and you can search for University of Ottawa on there, or it's also on your offer of admission. The designated learning institution is there. And just to clarify, this is a letter O, capital O, it is not a 0, just so you know. It's O and then a bunch of numbers. Your student ID, pretty straightforward. Here, duration of expected study. This from date, it will not let you put a date in the past. So the earliest date you can put is like today's date. So the date that you're filling out this form. So we're going to put October. And then 2, this is the important one. So this is where you're going to indicate the end date of your intended studies. Now, depending on when you think you're going to end your program, it is a good idea to request 3 months of extra validity, so that you have enough time to transition after you complete your program, graduate, get your documents, and apply for a new status. IRCC is supposed to give students an extra, this 90-day or 3 month grace period, this extra validity automatically after the intended study, the end of the intended study. But we advise students to request it directly to just, again, maximize the chance of you getting the validity, the full validity that you need. So let's use an example, Isabella. So Isabella thinks her last term will be winter 2023. So winter 2023, final exams are in April. The final grades aren't available until May, maybe even June. So she's going to request until July 31st to ask for that extra time to be able to get her final marks and then apply for a post-graduation work permit, for example. So whatever you think your last term is, add 3 months, basically. And that's what you would put here. So cost of your studies. So these don't have to be exact. They can be estimates, but if you have the exact cost, then you can put that there as well. You can see only the tuition one is mandatory. So just put your tuition fees, and this is for 1 year of study, not for your whole program. So tuition fees for 1 year, and then you can just estimate how much your living expenses are. Funds available for your stay. So this is where the minimum amount comes in. So as we talked about a little bit before, we recommend that students have, the equivalent of 10,000 Canadian plus their tuition fees for 1 year. So in that case, this would be 40,000 for Isabella. And this amount, whatever amount you put here, should be reflected in the financial documents that you're going to upload. So if you're uploading your parents' statements and they have, I don't know, like 100,000 in their account, well, then change this amount, like what match this amount to whatever amount you're demonstrating in your financial support documents. But just the minimum should be 10,000 plus tuition fees for 1 year is our recommendation. And then here's where you can indicate who's, if your expenses will be paid by yourself, your parents, or other. Sometimes it's like an aunt or a relative or whatever the case. So that's where you would put there. For Isabella, it is her parents. In addition to a study permit, are you also applying for a work permit? Again, this is where if you're in a co-op program or in a program that has mandatory internships or work terms, this is where you would say, yes, I'm applying. I need a co-op work permit. But Isabella is not in one of those programs, so she won't, but that's where you'll put that. This is for Quebec, so you can ignore it. And then here, education. So have you had any post-secondary education? So if you're extending your study permit, that means that you've already started your studies here at U Ottawa. So you can put, it doesn't say have you completed any, it's just have you had any. So feel free to put what you've done so far. So, Isabella has been studying since 2018. And you can just put your study. So Bachelor of Science, let's say, and then here U Ottawa, and then you can even leave this too blank. It's not mandatory. So feel free to put in what you've completed, or if let's say you're doing a grad studies right now and you've already done an undergrad, you could even put your undergrad degree here. So we're going to put Ottawa and then Canada. So you can also put, if your studies, your post-secondary studies were done elsewhere, you can put it here. Okay, employment. So this is another section that we get a lot of questions about. So give details of your employment for the past 10 years, including if you've had any government positions. And they want like employment inside Canada, outside Canada, really any job that you have had in the past 10 years. Part-time, full-time, doesn't matter. So, and do it, chronologically. So start with start with the most recent and then work backwards towards the oldest. If you run out of room this form, because there's not a lot of room here, there's like basically 3 sections. You have the opportunity to put like 3 jobs. So if you do run out of room, just know that you're able to expand on this in the client information section of your application. So you can either recreate this table or just something similar and just say like, by the way, like on my form, I ran out of room, but here are the additional jobs that I've worked in the past 10 years. And then you just give the details here. In Isabella's case, she hasn't worked. So she, just a student. So current activity, if you're not working right now, it's a current activity or occupation. So you can just put your studies, your student studies. So that is for employment. Then we get to the background information. So they're pretty straightforward. So, have you or a family member ever had tuberculosis or been in close contact? Yes or no? Do you have any physical or mental disorder that would require social and or health services other than medication during a stay in Canada? Yes, no. And then if you answer yes to any of these, you do need to provide details here. And then have you ever remained beyond the validity of your status, attended school without authorization, or worked without authorization in Canada? Yes, no. This is really important to be very truthful and honest in this because, I'll use an example. Let's say you did work more hours than you were supposed to, and you put no here. Then in the future, let's say IRCC finds out that you worked more hours than you're supposed to, and they go back to your form and they're like, well, you indicated no. This considered misrepresentation. So now we're refusing your postgrad work permit, for example. So providing incorrect information is considered misrepresentation, and that can have very, very severe consequences and negatively impact future applications. So just make sure to answer questions truthfully. You never want to misrepresent any facts. So answer these questions. Have you ever been refused a visa or permit for Canada or any other country? So an example I get a lot is, I actually applied for a US visa and was denied. Do I have to put that? Yes, you do. So you don't have to go into a lot of details, but you do need to mention if you've been, or even if your first study permit application was refused and you had to reapply and get accepted, you do just have to disclose it. So so for those two, that's pretty straightforward. For this one, have you previously applied to enter or remain Canada? All of you should be clicking yes for this because you all applied for a study permit and you're here on a study permit. So definitely put yes, and then you can just give, a little text here that just confirms like, I applied for a study permit in 2018. No, you don't need to give a lot of details, and you won't be able to give a lot of details because there's a character limit on this box and it's not that high. So try to be short and sweet, but just answer truthfully and disclose the details. Have you ever been arrested or charged or convicted? Yes, no. Do you serve in any military, militia, or civil defense, organization, police? Yes, no. Have you ever been a member or associated with any political party, that advocates for violence or that kind of thing? Yes, no. Have you ever witnessed ill treatment of prisoners, blah, blah, blah? Yes or no. So those are pretty straightforward. Here, there's a consent box to consent to be contacted by IRCC. That's a personal choice, yes or no. If you put no, it's not going to impact your application in any way. And then here is where you declare that you've answered all questions fully and truthfully. Like I said earlier, because you're submitting this electronically, you do not sign. You just type in your name exactly as it appears on your passport, and then you put the date that you're signing the form. And then you want to validate. So it's really important. You can't just save this. You do need to validate it. So you want to click validate. And then if it's successful, you'll see this message appear. And then you'll see barcodes appear at the bottom of your document. That's good. That means it's been successfully validated. So then you want to save this to make sure that you're saving the validated version so that then you can upload it in your checklist. And we're going to upload it together now. So let's just go back to our account. Ooh, that was close. I only had 1 minute left. Oh no, it kicked me out anyway. Okay, that happens. It's a security measure, so you'll just need to log back in. So demo, one. oops, of course now it's not working. It's just, okay. So log back in, and then it's going to ask you for a new security question. And then you can see here, now that because we've already started an application, it's showing up here. So continue an application you haven't submitted. So we're going to continue. And it gives you an opportunity to review your answers again. Great. All right. So now we're back to our checklist. So we've done this form. So now let's upload it. So let's go to upload, choose file, and then it's saved in here, here. So upload, it takes a few minutes. And then success, so then you return your documents. And you can see now this is green and it says uploaded. So basically you'll need to make sure that every single mandatory element in your checklist has something uploaded so that then the submit application button appears down here. So that's for the application form. Now, you'll notice that next to each element in your checklist, you have a little question mark. If you click on that, it basically gives you more info about what they're looking for. So as an example here, family information form, you have to complete it. It asks for information about your spouse, your parents, your children, stepchildren, any other thing. So let's just take a quick look at that form. I know we're getting close to the end of our time here. So I've already saved it here. So this is what the family information form looks like. It's pretty straightforward. Basically, you're gonna basically give the details of the family members that are listed here. So herself, Isabella, she doesn't have a spouse or common law partner, but then mother, and then where they are presently, so present address, so in Brazil, and then father also in Brazil, and then that's it. And then here, if there's no spouse or common law partner listed here, then you have to read and sign them below. So Isabella would need to fill this out because she doesn't have a spouse or common law partner. And then here is where she'd put in info about her children. And again, it says here, if no children are listed, you have to read and sign below. So you basically certify that you don't have any children. And then there's the actual certification that, you know, you've given everything you've said in this document is accurate and factual. So if you don't have a common law partner or spouse, you don't have any children, you will be filling this, you will be like basically signing it 3 times. So just keep that in mind for this form. Okay, so that is for that form. Passport, we kind of already talked about it. So, and then if you click on the little question mark, it kind of reiterates. So biographical data, any page that has a visa or marking. Letter of acceptance, we talked about that as well. So if you're a returning student, it's a letter of enrollment registration. So official enrollment verification, transcript, and offer of admission. You want to merge all 3 of those documents into one file, and that's what you're going to put in this letter of acceptance section. Proof of means of financial support, we talked about that as well. And it gives you examples here of documents that you can provide. So bank statements for the past 4 months, pay stubs, employment letter. You know, if you're getting a loan, you could include a letter here, a letter from the person or institution providing you with money. So like I was mentioning, if your parents are providing you with money, then they can provide you with a letter confirming that they're funding you. And that letter ideally should be notarized. If you're getting a scholarship, you can include a letter for that. These are just examples. Digital photo, again, if you click on here, it tells you exactly what it needs to be. So, you know, full front view, it gives you the size, the format. no more than 4 megs, and should be in color. So that's it for the required documents. You can see here optional documents. This one here, the Schedule 1 application for a visa, you can ignore this because even if you do plan to apply for a visa later, it's not possible to apply within the study permit extension application. So even if you fill this out, it's just going to be ignored. So you can just leave that blank. And then again, client information. This is where you have the opportunity to provide more information about your application that isn't anywhere else. So you can include, like I said, if you're not going to highlight anything, I hope that you at the very least highlight your timeline for completion of your program, because that can help increase the chance of you getting the full validity that you would need for your study permit. And then if you have any supporting documents that go with the letter, you'd have to merge it into one file and upload it here. Okay, so that is it for the application. So let me quickly go back to my PowerPoint because I see the time is just flying. So what happens after you've submitted your application? So it's possible that given, maybe you didn't apply 6 months in advance, maybe the processing times are really long. It's possible that IRCC takes longer to process your application. It takes so long that your current study permit expires while you're waiting for a decision. That's okay, as long as you've applied to extend it before the expiry. That's really important. So you can see here under maintain status. So you need to apply, you need to apply to extend your status before midnight coordinated universal time. And I know what you're thinking, what is coordinated universal time? I had to look that up myself. It's the time that IRCC uses that I've decided is the most fair for all time zones. So right now it is 4:51 coordinated universal time, which is 4 hours ahead of us. So keep that in mind, that midnight UTC is actually like 8 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you're not applying this last minute, but just keep that in mind if you are ever in that situation. You can check the processing times on the IRCC website, but like I said, they're really not accurate because of COVID. And then they also have this check your application status page, and that at least allows you to get a sense of where they're at in their processing. And I'll show you what I mean just really quickly. So you can see here, once you've applied, you can say, okay, I applied for a study permit. Right now, they're processing applications that were received in August. So that gives you an idea, okay, so it's going to take a few months before I get an answer, about, three-ish months. So like I said, if you apply before the expiry date, it's all good. If you applied before the expiry date and then the processing takes longer than your current study permit, you'll have maintained status, so you can keep studying and working until a decision is made on your application. Now, and I hope this doesn't happen to any of you, but if ever you don't submit your application before midnight universal coordinated time, you will have 90 days to submit an application to restore your status. Now, this 90-day period is not the same as maintained status. If you do not apply before the expiry, you lose your status. So it's lost. It means you have to stop studying or working immediately, studying and working immediately, and you can't resume until your application to restore your status has been approved. Like I mentioned earlier, studying or working without authorization may negatively impact future applications as well. So it can be very serious. So if ever you're in this situation, first of all, I very, very much recommend that you communicate with us so that we can support you with your restoration application. But basically the steps to restore your status are very similar to those to extend your status. And when you put the expiry date of your study permit when you answer the questionnaire and you put your expiry date, it'll automatically add the restoration fees to your account. So in addition to the $150 it costs to extend your status, you also have to pay $200 to restore your status. So you'll be paying $350 to restore your status in total. And then you'll be checking that box that we talked about to restore your status at the top of the form. And then you need, in this case, to include a letter in the client information section that explains why you're out of status, why you were unable to apply before the expiry of your permit. In most cases, you do need to apply online to extend your study permit, especially with COVID. They only accept paper applications if you can apply online due to a disability or there's an issue with the online application, but otherwise you must apply online. And it's actually better to apply online. They process it faster and it's a little bit more intuitive. There's less room for error when you're applying online. Okay, quickly, best ways to reach an immigration advisor. We have our weekly drop-in sessions called SOS Immigration. They rotate between Thursdays and Mondays, afternoon, morning. The schedule is on Facebook and on our website. So definitely, that's the quickest way to get an answer from us. You can also book a virtual advising appointment. Just send us an email and our email address is on the screen here. If you do want to request a virtual appointment, or you can also just send your questions by email. Just a little tip, I guess, if you are going to send us an email, having a clear subject line will help us triage our emails and provide you with an answer faster. So just as an example, let's say you have a question about this, you can just put immigration study permit extension as the subject, and then that way we can kind of answer you quicker, and it helps because we have multiple staff working in the same inbox, so that can just help us. And then there's a few other ways you can get information from us. We have our immigration FAQs that we update often. We have more information sessions like this one coming up. So coming up, have how to apply for a post-graduation work permit, how to apply for a co-op work permit. And we also have IRCC giving a session on a journey to an international student journey to permanent residence. That's coming up at the end of November. And then we also have our YouTube playlist that has recordings of previous sessions where this one will be added, for example. So, okay, that is the end of my spiel. And I see we're a little bit early, 12:56, not much. Are there any questions? I see a question. Yes, let me just put this back. My study permit expires in June, and I will have finished my bachelor's degree, but I want to continue in, I'm guessing that's master's degree, and I will have the letter of offer maybe around mid-March. That's not 6 months before the expiration. Is it good? Yes. So I would say in this case, so 6 months is like ideally when you'd want to be applying. But in this case, because you're waiting for an offer of admission, I would say it would be a good idea to wait until you're admitted so that then you have, something to use as the basis for your extension. It can be very difficult to successfully extend a study permit when you don't have proof that you have further studies remaining. So this is a good scenario example where I would say, yes, it's better to wait until you have your offer of admission before trying to extend your study permit. That's a great question. Are there any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So I'm guessing that means that there are no other questions, in which case I just want to thank you for attending this session. I hope it was helpful. And as I mentioned earlier, this recording and the slides will be available on our YouTube channel. So if ever you need to refer back to it, it'll be there. So I guess we will end the recording here. Thank you so much for participating.